All right, so thank you so much for this opportunity. And I would also like to thank you all for joining me. As you are aware, my name is Amanda, and I'm very excited to share with you Schneider's DevOps transformation. Because we can't physically be together and I can't meet you all in person, I would love to connect on LinkedIn and hear about what's going on in your organization and your DevOps transformations. So let's get the show on the road. Over the next 30 minutes, I will give you a brief introduction to Schneider, provide some context as to what led to our DevOps transformation, and take you on Tech at Schneider's DevOps journey, where I'm going to place focus not on tool sets, but rather on those things which we have done that I feel have helped us realize success. So let's start with an introduction of Schneider. 1935 was the year when one man with a truck and one dream decided to harness his entrepreneurial spirit and start a trucking company. It was the year Al Schneider took a leap of faith. Now, 85 years later, our built-to-last attitude has allowed Schneider to consistently provide you with a solution for your transportation needs, to include truckload, intermodal, and logistics services. From one truck and one man to now over 15,000 associates worldwide, with approximately 9,000 company tractors, over 70,000 company-owned trailers, containers, and chassis, and 190 facilities worldwide, we help our drivers move over 9 million loaded freight miles per day, which is comparable to driving around the globe over 400 times, again, per day. So now that you have a little background on who we are as Schneider, let's get to the topic you've all been waiting for, DevOps. To truly appreciate Schneider's DevOps journey, let's first talk about how the need for DevOps grew within Schneider. So in the beginning, we created silos by treating every piece of infrastructure and every application like it was a snowflake. Perhaps this is something that some of you can relate to. But by treating everything as different and special, we then needed different and special groups of people who could love and care for those applications. On top of that, we applied a waterfall project management methodology, which entailed mapping out a project into distinct sequential phases, with each new phase beginning only when the prior phase had been completed. This was, and in some cases still is today, the most traditional method for managing a project. But let's just say this is not quick, taking months or longer to deliver value to the business. What we found was that this approach came with its fair share of challenges. Requirements were not clear, as there was severe analysis paralysis and a fear to say that we're done, let's move on to the next stage. Changing requirements became increasingly expensive as a project progressed, and if you can't make changes, then the customer or the business doesn't get what they want. Projects took way too long, increasing their risk of success. And when the schedule got crunched, the first thing to go was testing. And most of all, these projects were not delivered on schedule. As the need to react quickly to the needs of the business became imperative, Agile entered the picture at Schneider in small pockets in 2015, with a full tech transformation in 2016. But what we saw was that we were still not moving as fast as we wanted to. We gained efficiency with Agile through planning and prioritizing work and leveraging ceremonies, but when it came to test and deliver code, we ran into roadblocks as we had not changed any of those processes. Say hello to DevOps. So if we fast forward to 2017, DevOps became that buzzword at Schneider, or just a regular topic of conversation. But because DevOps was the buzz, there was that healthy speculation around why a transportation company like Schneider should adopt DevOps. Is it because it's the new trendy thing? It sounds cool. Everybody else is doing it. Or are we really trying to solve a problem and make an impact? So now that you have a good understanding of our ecosystem and what really led to our DevOps transformation, let's talk more specifically about some of those critical components that I believe have enabled our success. The first is defining your why, meaning why are you doing DevOps? Like I said, is it the new trendy thing? It sounds cool. Or what is that problem that we're trying to solve? What was Schneider's why? I think there were many whys, some of which I spoke of as I walked you through how we arrived at this point, but one which is still talked about today is what you see on the screen. I know it's an eye chart, but what is not important is the information on the slide, but more the story behind the picture. So at Schneider, we're very lucky to be an organization that regularly celebrates 30+ year associate anniversaries. Because of this, we relied on tribal knowledge. As long as you knew who to go to based on what you needed, we were good, relying on a person. Not to say that we didn't have documentation or any processes, but when it came down to it, a part of our culture was valuing tribal knowledge, valuing people's experiences, valuing those go-to people. And because of that value, it just became part of how we operated. So this whole idea of an exercise where we sat down and captured all of the tasks required to install one application in one environment, making work visible, was just not something that we regularly did. So that's what you see here, the outcome of that exercise, a fishbone diagram that allowed us to not only visualize the high-level tasks required, but really dig deeper into task dependencies, order of work, and the teams required. So this diagram is nothing impressive, but as you dig a level deeper, it becomes eye-opening. So to support all of the tasks on this diagram, there were over 50 handoffs and 17 teams required for this specific effort. Again, to build one app in one environment. And keep in mind that at this time, we probably had 8 environments this effort would have to be duplicated for. So when I saw these numbers for the first time, I instantly thought back to my childhood. Did you ever play that game Telephone as a child? How many handoffs did it take before Johnny picked an apple by the tree became Johnny picked his nose by the sea? That's exactly what's going on here with handoffs. Not only do we lose the message or the knowledge we intend to transfer bit by bit as it goes down the line, but one could be waiting for some time to get a message and not even the correct message. And just imagine what could happen if this handoff occurred 50 times for one environment across 17 teams. All of this leaving us with a project that takes much longer than you initially planned and directly correlates to higher cost among so many other factors. So taking a step back from this exercise, we captured some of those major factors or themes contributing to our case for change as to why at our current rate and pace, we wouldn't be capable of increasing our quality and delivery speed unless we took action. So these themes included the large number of handoffs across teams and environments, but also limited visibility to work and lack of automation, which causes inconsistency and inefficiencies, among the others you see listed here. The cherry on top for us was that our existing release and deployment toolset was end of life and out of support. So telling our story, no matter how bad it may look or sound, but really pulling back the covers and putting it all out there was something that was uncomfortable. Because of that, telling the story was something that we put a lot of effort into, a lot of time and thought, and really became one of those critical factors that allowed us to gain support to move forward. So as part of our case for change, and specific to some areas, we defined key goals and objectives. These are some of the goals that we defined for our release automation area. I would strongly recommend including metrics as part of your business case to include your current state metrics and how you want to impact those metrics with your transformation. So this is one area where we really didn't have much insight in the form of hard numbers before we began because we just didn't have an accurate way to measure our legacy processes. But the bottom line is that metrics can tell a story where words cannot. So spend time collecting and analyzing where you are and where you want to be and measure it consistently. This will give you insights and allow you to pivot as you move forward to ensure you are realizing the value you sought out to achieve. Last, include statements from your stakeholders about the value you will gain from implementing any one of these features. Again, this is an example I pulled from our release automation area, but when sharing this information with our leadership team, it really helped build the need and case for change. So by including the voice of many as part of our business case, it conveyed that larger need and ability to impact. And don't just do this as part of your business case, but continue to survey and collect feedback from your general tech population early and often. In the end, it's all about your user's experience. And in this case, our end user is the tech department, and their feedback is really valuable. Identify the people who will be your torchbearers and sponsors and clarify roles and responsibilities. So our journey started with a cross-functional platform team who really focused on environments, infrastructure, testing, basically all the things. They weren't full-time, but they were acting as multipliers and catalysts in addition to their regular roles. Because this was really important to us and there was a need to place a focused effort, just due to the large amount of change needed, we pulled key architects and other leads onto 2 teams that would help drive our efforts forward. So the first team is our DevOps team, and I know everyone always says DevOps is not a team, and I completely agree. So true, but developing that temporary team whose full-time job is to focus on the transition was key to our success. Because this team is temporary, they focused on implementing tool sets and processes and really helping teams transition onto those platforms. Some of our key gains in transitioning to a hybrid cloud model or setting up an OpenShift cluster on-prem are due to their efforts, along with many other key goals. After implementation, they would work with the long-term owning team of those processes or tools to hand off and transfer knowledge. The second team began as the release management team, who had owned all of our application deployment and versioning toolset software, which we shortly thereafter rebranded to Release Automation. While they work closely with our DevOps team, their focus really has been driving forward work in the continuous delivery, continuous integration space, working with teams to build out consistent, reliable, and repeatable processes for developing and delivering applications to environments. Well, this has been their focus for the past year. Soon their focus is going to shift to supporting teams in building automation and continuous improvement of the release lifecycle. So in addition to those on the front lines, we also formed a steering committee, which we met with on a regular basis to discuss funding, priorities, and strategy. This group was really made up of a subset of our tech directors and helped ensure alignment across all areas. Not shown on this slide, but additionally, we also have a monthly cadence with our VPs to spotlight work, celebrate wins, and discuss ongoing efforts and strategy. So I say this all the time. If you surveyed, X number of people asking them to define DevOps, each person would likely have a different definition. So for us, we really needed to define and prioritize our capabilities to create alignment and focus. So in the beginning, our capability definition for sure did not look as nice as this, but really began as that working document where we captured all of the areas that we wanted to examine for efficiencies and automation. We then grouped them into categories and placed them into what we call levels. So these levels then represented a high-level priority and focus for our implementation, with level 1 being the items we wanted to tackle first, then level 2, and so on. So going through this exercise really allowed us to narrow in on a few areas versus being overwhelmed by the sheer amount of scope we wanted to examine. As we continue moving forward, we adjust as priorities change, but this really allowed us to define at a higher level a scope of focus, which could then be supported by funding and referenced as a key anchor point across tech. So what you see here is our level 1, which focused on developer enablement, monitoring, architecture, and CI/CD. Level 2 included planning and testing. And level 3 included configuration management, environments, and our as code movement. Develop a roughly right plan. So this slide shows the roll-up of the 3 levels of capabilities that were defined for our DevOps transformation. Did we complete them all? No. Are we still working to address these areas? Yes. Have priorities changed since we drafted this list? Of course. The plan we developed was a starting point. Even now, as we continue to move forward, we pivot and we make updates as needed. So our key takeaway here was, at the beginning, we didn't know everything we wanted to achieve. Once we started, we realized we needed a capability chart, or that roughly right high-level plan for scope and schedule. Without this, it's hard to create a vision and generate excitement. It's not an easy task, but it's definitely a necessary one. The execution of our plan and seeing the changes within our department was probably the most exciting and challenging part for me. There were so many scenarios where we were asked to paint the picture of what our DevOps transformation looked like once it was complete. But the reality is that it will probably never be complete. And that was not an easy thing to say to our leadership when we were securing funding or discussing progress, but it's the truth. There really is no destination, but at some point, this mindset change and transformation of our processes will just be normal, everyday tasks. There were some changes we made that were difficult and required us to go back to the table and think about how to continue moving forward, or if we wanted to continue moving forward. But at the same time, others were not as challenging. Either way, our DevOps transformation scope is large, and because of that, it can be really hard to digest, not just for the teams doing the work, but also from an impact standpoint. So there were times where we were trying to make too many changes at once, new infrastructure architecture, enforcing quality gates, requiring a certain percentage of unit tests for new code written. It was just too much at once, and our developers were struggling. So wherever possible, we really tried to make small changes, not at the same time, while also determining a plan for how to scale those changes to the larger department. We know this transformation will not be a light switch, but rather a slow and steady journey across multiple years. Once we began accepting this, we gained greater focus on our goals and not just focused on the timeline. So as part of our execution, we leveraged SharePoint and now Microsoft Teams to engage teams across tech. Though not everyone is directly involved in the upfront efforts for a change, many are impacted. So by providing teams channels where they can interact by posting questions or feedback or creating a blog, we were able to share and engage a wider audience, ultimately bringing them along on the journey versus it feeling like we're just doing this to them. Another engagement method that we continue to plan and execute today are what we call learning sessions. Of course, we had some fun with the names and descriptions for these sessions, like DevOps for database, it's not fake news, on a Trump meme for our database deployment automation tool set, or a Hunger Games meme for a session titled, May the Pods Ever Be in Your Favor, to share knowledge about running and managing pods in a cloud environment. So prior to implementing any changes, we would hold a learning session where, the DevOps team or the release automation team would provide an overview of the why, a demo of the capability or the architecture, and collect feedback or answer questions. And even before that, we would reach out to vendors if we were introducing new tool sets and ask them for stickers of their logo or a symbol, which we could pass out to those who attended. And, to my surprise, every vendor, even those for which we were using an open source version of their software, sent stickers. So word spread pretty quick about these sticker party favors, and these sessions would fill up fast. So we've been averaging about 20 unique learning sessions that we offer multiple times a year. And I've saw an average of 35 plus people at each session. So it was a big success for us. One of our goals was to make process visible through executable documentation, then continuously improve our process by injecting more automation. So the key focus here was creating consistent, reliable, and repeatable processes from code commit to production deployment and all the steps in between, manual or automated. In our previous tool set, we wrote scripts for each application deployment that ultimately became snowflakes that needed a lot of love and care. In our new tool sets, we leveraged out-of-the-box capabilities to replace custom scripts and took a technology-based approach to building out processes or pipelines, meaning if you have a Spring Boot service to deploy, we have one pipeline that all of our developers use. We have hundreds of Spring Boot services that are all leveraging those same processes. This gave us consistency not only in process, but if we decided to move any of those developers to a different team, the onboarding time is reduced as they already are comfortable with that process. We also spent a lot of time developing a plan for incorporating things like quality gates that would stop our builds if code quality was not met into our pipelines. So when approaching this feature and others, we knew we had sins of the past, meaning old code that may not meet these new requirements. To ensure we were not impacting our developer experience, but also focusing on things like quality, we implemented a phased plan to slowly integrate code quality into our process. We began with low gates or low expectations and focused only on new code, and then slowly and incrementally increased those gates with each step. So taking this change and others slowly was the only path to success while ensuring our developers were able to continue delivering value to the business. So I think too often we try to draw a box around something to understand it, but what I hope you can take away from all that we've discussed today is that DevOps is not black and white. There is no playbook or clear roadmap to a destination. The journey is really yours to develop, and if your organization is currently on your own journey, or if you're thinking about beginning a DevOps transformation, just remember DevOps is not prescriptive. Define good metrics, develop a multi-year strategy, prioritize people, change, and learning, and start somewhere in a small way and scale as you go. While our journey is nowhere near complete, we have realized real change across our tech department. Sometimes it gets a little worse before it gets better, but our developers and operations teams are our biggest cheerleaders and are fully committed to our technology quest. So thank you again for joining me today. I hope you were able to virtually walk away with some ideas of how to ignite or reignite the DevOps transformation within your organization.